All right, now we're getting to the most important of the 2 and 3 part form lectures, the rounded binary form. So if we think about form and trying to not make a snapshot, we see that the regular binary is a problem. Because if A and B are the same length, the climax moment, which is coming to be, there's a cadence here, is right at the halfway point. It's like a snapshot. And while it worked well for dance, it makes for lousy concert music. Now if I do this, my climax is there, and it looks like it's right at the 2/3 mark. We think that's perfect. And in some ways, this form is great. Mozart used it a lot in slow movements of his symphonies. It's a good form. But the trouble with the ABA form is that if in a short piece, B is often transition material. If we modulate to get to B, a lot of B is getting back to A. And if this is lighter or shorter than A, then this becomes overwhelming. And in fact, this may come too early. And then the ending seems anticlimactic. You just got a lot of A and not much else. So a form was invented pretty early on, which is called rounded binary. And rounded binary is a 2-part form, but the second part is this lighter B, and then the second half of B, it turns out, is a half of A. So you get A, and then you've got this second part, which has both B and A in it. Almost every minuet, at least from after Haydn, so the Mozart minuets, the Beethoven minuets, are in this form. So a lot of the Bachs are in this form. So even the Baroque era, we're seeing it. And you can see how this works. You have this heavy bit of A, and then you've got a lighter B. So when you come back to the climax, you don't overwhelm it. You just do half of A, bring us back to the ending. And it makes for a beautiful, it's just a very effective form. And we call it rounded binary because even though it looks like it's 3 parts, this is really 1 part. So it's a 2-part form, and it's rounded off so that the second half of B is so much like A, it just feels like you just tied it up in a nice little bow. It's a very effective form. So this is what minuets were usually written in. Now, those suites that we talked about, they became symphonies and sonatas and string quartets. And the first movement was no longer a dance form. It becomes a sonata form. The second movement may be in a 3-part form. It could be sonata form. It could be lots of things. The last movement is usually a rondo or sonata. It's lots of things. But if there are 4 movements, the third is almost always in this minuet form. In fact, what they do is they put 2 minuets together. They have a minuet, then they have a second one, which would be C, D, and half of C. And they give this one a weird name. They call this one the minuet, and they call this one the trio. Why trio? It's not 3 instruments. It's just called a trio. And I said this backwards, but dyslexia is showing. Half of C. And then they usually repeat the whole thing, B, 1/2 of A. And if you look at that, what you see is that, and I'll show you in a second, it looks like it's that the big minuet trio is a ternary form, but not. Because the other thing is that they do a set of repeats. To show you it's a 2-part form, they repeat A, and then they repeat this whole big thing. So it's a 2-part form. It's this part, and this part, it's a 2 reprise form. They do the same in the trio, and then they don't in the recap. So if we think of the minuet as A, if we think of the trio as B, then without the repeats, we get half of A. And so the entire minuet and trio is a rounded binary made up of 3 rounded binaries. It's very clever, so that you get this larger form, and the structure of the large thing puts us right in the golden section. The small forms are all nicely structured, and we can hear them as complete entities, and it makes for a really beautiful form. So we're building rounded binaries together to make something larger that's still a rounded binary. Does that make sense? If not, let me know. Now, by the way, this is going to be our last lecture for the year, unless you're desperate to know about the golden section. I think I'd probably do that in second year of theory anyway. But if you want that, I'll put together a lecture for you on it, or I can send you PowerPoint on it. Or we can just talk about it, or we can save it for another time. But just let me know what you'd like. Now, so we've got some problems with rounded binary, though. There are a lot of pieces that are hard to define. For example, if A is very short, and then you have a long B, and then an A, this is going to feel, because that A is so short there, this is going to feel like a rounded binary. Or if A is very long, even if you do half an A, this will feel like a ternary because that A is so powerful. Sometimes we can't tell. In fact, I've looked at pieces of music and looked at 4 or 5 different websites and found different answers. That the same piece is called a binary, a ternary, and a rounded binary, all by professional theorists. So oftentimes when we see an ABA, it's very hard to know what it is. The repeats are a giveaway. If you have the reprise form and you have 2 repeats, it's a rounded binary. It's 2 sections, and each section repeats. If you have 3 repeats, it's a ternary, because there are 3 sections that repeat. So when composers give us repeats, we know what their intention is. But when they don't have repeats, it's often very hard to know. So let's just realize that the line between ternary and rounded binary, the line between a 2-part form and a 3-part form is actually remarkably small. That's weird, but remember, we're talking theory, which is more art than science. And we get to, as long as you can justify your answer, you get to make any claim you want. Just look at the score and use it to justify the answer. And it doesn't have to agree with my justification. It just has to be logical and good. Now, in pop music, in the olden days, I'm talking about, say, 1920s, 1930s, the days of Gershwin, Broadway shows, you would have a verse, and then you'd have a chorus. So you'd have this sort of almost recitative-like thing, and then you'd have the main body of the song, of course, which would repeat. This verse, what we call a verse then, goes away. It's not quite the same as doing verses we talk about hymns. This is sort of an introduction. Very free. That disappears later in Broadway. The verse goes away, and then we have the chorus. And the chorus form is usually an A, a B, and an A. This is in pop music. Now, today, this could be quite different. And in rock and roll, sometimes the B is a guitar solo. So you have voice, voice, guitar, voice. But if you think about something like Somewhere Over the Rainbow, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, blah, 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 dee, da, 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 right? Then ba dee da dee da dee da dee da dee da dee da finally Somewhere Over the Rainbow, A. That is so common. And so this form, you think about it, what is this form? This is, if I look at a rounded binary, I have A, repeat A. Well, let's not say rounded binary, let's say A, and then B, and then half of A. So in a sense, if we call this 2 A's and A, it's a rounded binary form. That's all this is, rounded binary. Or we can think of it this way, that you have an A, B, A, like a ternary form, and you just do it with 1 repeat. That's kind of that bar form we talked about from the early days, the Renaissance. And that bar form would give us A, B, A. It's almost like you still have a rounded binary, you just left off the last repeat. So it's a cousin of rounded binary or ternary form. It's just got an extra A stuck in there, so it's got an extra repeat, or it's got 1 repeat instead of 2. It's got 1 less repeat. But this is what we call American song form, or sometimes just song form, or 32-bar form, or the book has lots of names. It's got lots of names. A lot of the names are whoever that you're gigging with. But the one thing that's most common is that B is called the bridge. So you hear people say, let's take it from the bridge. That means the B section. What's interesting is if classical musicians, if I say, let's take it from the bridge, they'll say, what measure number is that, right? We're so used to being together and knowing measure numbers. Jazz and rock musicians, they know what a bridge is. If you say, let's take it from the bridge, don't take it from the bridge. You don't have to say, let's go 32 measures in, or 18, or 17 measures, or whatever it is. You say, from the bridge. And they know, because it's A, B, A. And that's just the form. That's how we talk. So there's other names for this as well. Bridge is the most common. But these forms are as important in popular music as they are in classical music. Important in real pop, in rock, in jazz, in Broadway, you name it. These forms still exist, and they just guarantee success. You don't have to write these forms, but if you do, you know the structure will be sound and people will be satisfied with the shape of the piece. That's it. All right. So then I'll see you at the final. And if you have any questions, we'll do some review sessions. Let me know, and we'll get you all ready to take the final. Thank you. It's been a great quarter. Stay well. Bye-bye.